This is The Bad Listener with Danny Stroh.
Mike Testa, you're a pastor, Holy Mountain Ministries. You want to give the address?
Yeah, 6144. Yeah.
64 Amboy Road, Pleasant Plains, Staten Island. So I only know fragments of basically your background with music or your background at all, but because I know obviously you play the guitar, right? So, and I know obviously you said you used to rap, right? You were just talking about that. Give me the history on that. What was that journey like?
So when I got into music, I started playing the guitar.
Okay.
Strictly because a buddy of mine played the guitar before, and I thought like it would attract girls. So I was like, I'm going to start playing the guitar. Like, this is going to be great. And then I started playing it and I sucked. I was miserable.
And how old were you?
I was like 13.
Oh, you're really young. Okay.
But I didn't start really playing the guitar until I was probably like 15. And the thing that I loved about music, the beauty of it, I didn't catch on until like later on I realized this. The guitar, because it's a stringed instrument, it's very much like a voice. It's very vocal. Like when you're playing a guitar, your fingers are touching the strings. So you make the note happen. It's very different than like playing the piano. The piano, you touch a key, the key triggers the string. But with the guitar, any stringed instrument, your finger's right on the string. Like you have so much control over the note. It's very similar to a voice. So I always viewed the guitar as a voice. And I was like, well, this is great because I can't sing to save my life. I was like, so this is like my vocal. So I always tried to play the guitar. And then I started listening to guys like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai. There's like these great like instrumental type guitar players. I kind of listened to them and I tried to make my playing style like them. And then it grew, styles change, you get more into it. You're practicing a lot more throughout high school. I was practicing like 4 or 5 hours a day. But that's when you have the time to do it. And then something shifted where I started getting mentored. When I was like 18 or 19 years old, I became a Christian. I don't know if you've been asked all this, but I'm just going to give you my musical history.
Well, okay. I was going to say, let's do the musical history and then we can go into your Christian history. But if you want to go back and forth.
No, yeah. So the music, it turns out that a buddy of mine, when I became a Christian, I realized I was like 18, 19 years old, probably more like 19. And I was like, I'm not going to make it. Like, I believe that this is true. I believe that it's real. But there's no possible way that I could walk out if I don't have somebody helping me along the way. So I knew of somebody who I had met at church. I was friendly with him, but didn't really know him. It was my friend Aaron. And I literally reached out to him. It was as pathetic as it could possibly get, but it was genuine and sincere. And I called him and I was like, yo, dude, I was like, for real, I need somebody to take me under their wing and kind of walk me through this process because I don't think I'm going to make it. I have no Christian friends. I'm saturated with worldly friends. Everybody around me is doing what they're doing. And we already know what that's all about. And he told me, he said, yo, you want to know something? The last time I saw you, I thought the exact same thing, that I need to take you under my wing. And he's like 8 or 9 years older than me. And then we developed a relationship from there. It turns out he was a rapper. He was a Christian rapper. Okay. He wasn't always a Christian rapper, but when he got saved, he became a Christian rapper. And I started hanging out with him. And then I kind of fell into like the whole hip hop thing. And the thing that I loved about hip hop was that it's in some sense, it's more vocal than the guitar. And again, I can't sing, but now I have a literal voice. I'm using English. I'm using words. And that turned into a way that I would not just express myself, but then also express the gospel. And I was under his wing, so I'm kind of like following him. And that was how I got into hip hop. And then what I was doing when I was rapping, I was putting the guitar and hip hop together. It was crazy. It was a great experience.
Yeah. Okay. So did you record any actual albums, or you were?
Oh yeah, we got a ton of stuff. Okay. We do. It's actually.
You mean you and as a group? Or?
Me and my boy Aaron, we started a group. It was called Freestyle Fam.
Okay.
We did like a lot of freestyling on the street. It was like part of like our ministry, what we did. There's even videos on YouTube. If you YouTube Freestyle Fam, you'll see like all of our videos. There's so much stuff that we have that's unreleased.
Right.
Like we probably have a whole album right now that's unreleased with like super good production. Songs that were so well done that just never got out there, unfortunately. But yeah, we started a group. We did a whole bunch of stuff. We did that for years, and then it kind of just petered out. Like the industry's not easy.
Yeah,
we're getting older. We're married. Who has kids? It's like this ain't paying no money.
Yeah.
Like this ain't gonna work.
Yeah, that's interesting because obviously my brother he just had him on 2 nights ago.
Right.
He was telling all his stories about, because he got into hip hop when he was very young. I mean, he probably started trying to record when he was like 13, 14, and then is still doing it. He's still making a new record. I mean, in whatever free time he has, obviously. I think the last album that came out 5 years ago. I think that was like a 10-year in the making album. It took him just because of, everything that goes on.
You know what's really
Um,
funny? Not to cut you off.
Yeah, sure.
We ran into each other before we knew each other, before he was a Christian, at a club in the city. He went there to support his boy who was rapping in a showcase event. It was like a micro, I forgot what it was called, like some sort of like freestyle challenge. And I went there to perform one of our songs. And it turned out that the night that I was going, he was going, and there was an entry level to get into. There was you had to like have a rap off to get into the challenge. If you weren't invited,
Right.
you have to get up on stage and like go against like 4 or 5 other MCs, and the crowd would cheer to get you in, and there was one slot
So
left open.
It was like 8 Mile.
Like 8 Mile. And so I got in. I was like, let me just sign up. It can't hurt to do it. And then I remember when they got to me and the beat dropped, they gave me like a specific beat. I was like, I'm murdering this joint. It was so perfect. It was great. There was like 100 people there, and then I got in. I didn't win the competition. Neither did Rob's friend. But it's funny because years later we're in church together, and he's like, yo, crazy story. You were at EO-Dub on such and such. I was like, yeah, how'd you know? He goes, I got you on video. It was crazy. It was so funny. It's a small world.
Now, you were doing this all Christian hip hop.
All Christian hip hop.
Okay,
Very
right.
edgy. It's like street New York battle type bars, but no
Yeah.
cursing, nothing sexually
Right.
explicit.
That's what I was. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to do. Yeah. So now you're obviously co-pastor with your mom,
Right.
Holy Mountain Ministries. She has been a Christian since before you were born, after you were born.
She was a Christian since before I was born. Met my dad, backslid a little.
Okay.
But still, I would say that God was still could I say that she wasn't saved? No. But definitely struggling in her faith, but still the Lord was still very real to her. She still prayed all the time, even went to church. And then the second that I was born, once I was born and my dad was out of the picture, that was pretty much like when like the dust settled and she got back into church full time. And then eventually years after that got into full-time ministry, started working in a church, left her career job, and so on and so forth.
I only asked because you said you became a Christian at 18, 19 years old. I mean, you were raised as a Christian. No?
Yes. So I was raised in a Christian household. It's kind of weird. It's even like, it's hard to like tell the story because there was never a point in my life where I ever felt that God was not real or that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Maybe I had like minuscule doubts, like minor doubts stuff, but there was like this still small piece that I had on the inside of me that what I was raised in was absolutely true. I think that most of what I dealt with growing up, as real as it was probably some sort of emotional rebellion towards the fact that I grew up without my dad, a stigma because of who he was, a stigma because of how I was born, planned,
Right.
things like that. And then the frustration of him not being around kind of gets to you as you get older.
Yeah.
Even when you're a teenager, like not to like be like the boy who cried that his daddy wasn't home, because so many kids are raised without their dads. But I think that most of my rebellion was based towards was based more on emotions, not intellect.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I completely, I was just, I wanted to understand if there was a point where, like, hey, I only have my own life to compare to, right? And obviously from the ages of 14 to 21, I probably made, I don't know how many bad decisions that things could have gone a million different ways for me. And when you said at 18 or 19, I was wondering if if you had like a similar experience as a teenager where you weren't really living a Christian lifestyle.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
I was
all
doing
right.
probably everything that most like New York teenagers do.
Okay.
We were partying, fighting,
Right.
drinking, doing drugs,
Okay.
sleeping around.
Okay.
Very, very prototypical. The only thing that I would say, and I don't know where this comes from, I had this strange inner conviction. It's what I guess it would be like the inner witness of the Holy Spirit, like what I would use in Christian terms now, like theologically. But I always knew what I was doing was wrong. And then it was strange because even though I wasn't living right, and everybody knew I wasn't living right, there were still certain things that I wouldn't do. Like I wouldn't go to a strip club. I've never been to a strip club in my life, which is interesting. All my boys went to strip clubs. I would never sleep with a prostitute.
Right.
All my friends did. Just interesting, like little things like that. I always knew, like there was some level of deprivation that I just wouldn't go to. I don't know why. Not that I'm better than anybody, but I guess my point though would be like there was always that inner conviction that was there the entire time, despite the fact that if you saw me on the street or you met me, you probably would be like, "Oh, this kid's clearly not saved."
No, yeah, I can completely understand that. I guess I'll go through my history so we have a little bit more background on like where I'm coming from. You know, it was funny. I was hoping like it was like never, you know, because I'm trying to raise Christian children.
Right.
I don't ever want them to do a fraction of the things that I've done. Don't even want to take the chance. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. I know I had a feeling your mother's was Christian from at least since you were born. So that's why my questioning was like, all right, what do I do here? Type of thing. No, yeah. So I was raised Roman Catholic. You know, baptized, communion, confirmation.
Did you go to church on Sundays?
You went to church on Sundays probably up until I was, I don't know.
Okay.
We probably stopped going to church every Sunday, but because
there's a foundation though there.
Yeah, there was a foundation, but I mean, it's, you know, I think back on this now, and it's like for there being even even if there was this foundation until I was 10 where I or whatever, I did all these, you know, the communion, the confirmation, like I couldn't tell you anything about the religion, like, you know what I mean? Like almost nothing.
I totally get it.
Which is like,
that's, you know, most Christians in the West today, actually.
Well, or people who were raised Catholic, yeah. I would think, you know? So then basically religion wasn't a part of my life at all, I would say, from confirmation on until my mom was saved. Obviously, I don't know if you know the whole story with that. My parents got divorced. I was about 20 years old when they got divorced. And my mom was obviously not in a great place after that. She had, you know, she struggled and everything. And then her friend, Kim Colbeck, you know, Kim, right? Mm-hmm. So Kim, I don't know what book she gave her or how she got her to, you know, see the light or whatever, but she, you know, basically helped get my mom saved, and then my mom became saved. And then within the next, I think 3 or 4 years after that, my brother and my sister were both saved. So at that point, I mean, I was happy for them, but I you know, I had no connection whatsoever to Christian. I mean, I couldn't relate at all to anything they were experiencing as far as like, you know, trying to, I don't want to beat up on anybody. My mom had tactics that I look back at now and I don't think were the best tactics. She tried to use a lot of like fear tactics. You're going to go to hell, you know, and that, like,
fire and brimstone.
That doesn't really, I mean,
belief in God is actually just fire insurance.
Right.
I got it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that, and it was like, I mean, I could see now they probably had like a lot of frustration because they couldn't reach me, and I guess I had to go through my own process in life. And, you know, obviously it wasn't until I guess my son was born where I really started to embrace the idea of it, I guess. Or I started to embrace the idea maybe a little bit before that. I don't know. It's just like, I'm in this weird position right now because everything's so new to me. Mm-hmm. And I have this kind of fresh memory on what I thought not so long ago. So I feel like I should be able to use that information to like help other people. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I'm like, basically I couldn't, you know, when my mom and my brother, you know, my brother was in a bad place, my mom was in a bad place. And then you have this thing. It's like, okay, when people are in a really bad situation and they need something, this works. You know what I mean? And kind of like look at it as like, you know, just another medicine to help you in life, you know, feel better and live a better lifestyle or whatever. So, you know, I look at it, my life at the time, and I'm like, I'm fine. I don't have any of these issues. I don't think I can get anything out of this. I've gotten this far in my life without Jesus or the Bible or Christianity. I don't see why I would just adopt it now. It doesn't really make sense. And, you know, obviously I'm saying that because I realize how stupid that sounds now, but I think that's how a lot of people think. Like, if you are not in a dire situation, I don't need this. Like, you know, that's just like the mindset. And then there's the mindset also that it seemed very illogical to me. It seemed illogical that now I had obviously never read anything out of the Bible, never a page, but I knew the stories, and it was, you know, it just seemed illogical that you're going to try to tell me that somebody was alive who did things that we know as a society aren't possible to do. So it's like almost like you're trying to sell me on like Lord of the Rings or something. Like I was like something that I couldn't.
It's fantasy.
Right. Like it's like, okay, I get that you believe it and it helps you, but I can't adopt that belief. It just doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It seems silly, but obviously, you know, you can't tell them that because that's their belief system. So that was like, you know, kind of the ways that I looked at it at the time. And then I remember really where I really kind of first started thinking about it or getting into dipping my toes in a little bit was when COVID happened. I kind of like, I never paid attention to politics my entire life. Didn't care. My father raised me as, don't bother watching the news. It's all fake. It's like all the, like, just not, you just don't even waste your time.
It's not bad advice, to be
No,
honest.
it really
It's
isn't.
not-
He goes, whatever like, you know, we see fake news. I mean, that's basically what the news was never on in my house growing. Never once did either of my parents ever
Wow.
put the news on. We got the Staten Island Advance, and that was it. There was no Wall Street Journal or New York Times in my
Right.
house. They didn't pay attention to the news whatsoever. And, you know, that was my dad's thing is, you know, the news is all, you know, the politicians are all puppets and the news is all fake. Don't even pay attention to it or whatever. So that's how I was raised. I never paid attention to it. Obviously, when COVID hit, it was almost like I was forced to pay attention to it. My whole life was being
Turned upside
down by what people in power were doing. So
Right.
like now, you know, you're sitting home or, you know, you can't do anything. Everything's like, you know, what else am I going to do but
Right.
try to dig into this? And, you know, then I dig into that. And then I kind of see, obviously this is where, you know, America starts their crazy divide and who agrees with the news and who doesn't agree with the news. And obviously the people I found myself aligned with online or in politics or in life in general seem to all be Christians.
Mhm.
So I seem to like see this like parallel where the people who I was like, all right, I agree with that guy. And then that guy would say, you know, praise be to the Lord. And I'd be like, okay. I'm like, and you keep seeing that happen. You're like, all right, so there's something here. Like there's something there. Their mindset's the same as mine, except that they're Christian.
Right.
So that's kind of where I was like, you know, and then I guess I start to look at the Bible a little bit differently. I start to, you know, okay, you know, maybe the Bible is a really good book. Like I remember I would say, well, even if everything in it isn't true, it's still a really good book to
Right.
read and go by.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You know, so you start with that or whatever. And then just a year and a half after COVID hit, my son was born, Hunter, my oldest son was born, Hunter. And so the two parts to this is what happened to me when he was born. I didn't really understand until later on, if that makes sense. I think that God was with me. They gave me my Kristen had a C-section and like with I don't know if Gabi's
I don't know anything.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, you know, they basically give you the baby so that she can see the baby, whatever. But then they kind of have to like put her back together. So like they kind of like bring you into another room and
Yeah.
give you the baby until she's ready to come out. So I have this like alone time with my son, and it just felt like, and it was nothing I expected. I mean, I expected obviously to be super emotional about it, but like the way I felt was way more intense than I
Yeah.
ever thought I was going to. So like now when I think back on that, I'm like, I'm pretty sure like God was trying to tell me something or whatever it was, he had to be in the room. Like Jesus had to be there because it was just such an overwhelming, intense feeling. You know, I was
I have
sobbing.
goosebumps.
I was sobbing. Like, you know what I mean? Like just never felt that way before. And at the time I'm like, okay, maybe this is just like what everybody goes through. I don't know. And then it wasn't until like I would share that experience with people and they'd kind of be like, oh, okay. Like, and not share the same reaction. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. But now, like, and then it was funny because even when Trevor was born, I kind of had, and I expected not to have the same experience because I'm like, all right, I already did. Like, it's not going to be that crazy. And I kind of felt that same, like, and not to it sounded in the straightest way possible, like me holding my son, it felt like Jesus was holding me.
I was just about to say that.
You know what I mean?
I didn't want to cut you off because you were in a flow, but I just wanted to say that what
You cut me off.
what you're feeling in that moment, what I think that the Lord was trying to convey to you in that moment is how he feels about you.
Right.
And what's so unbelievable about the love of God is that think about the way that you feel about your baby. How much do you love your son? You chop your arm off for him to live. No question. You wouldn't even think about it.
Of course.
Your love sucks compared to God's love. And that's how
Uncomparable.
and God loves you, your baby, more than you do, more than you ever could. And he feels the same exact way about you. And I think that's what you're feeling in that moment.
Right.
And to me, just listening to your story, the Lord must have been priming you for some time. And I would even go as far as to say it was before COVID.
No, it was. I'll finish.
Yeah.
But no. So basically at this point, now, you know, obviously, you know that your mindset kind of changes a little bit when you have kids, and it's hard to
Always,
explain
yeah.
this to somebody who doesn't have kids, but whatever was important in your life before that child is born,
Mhm.
it's not really that important
Yeah,
anymore.
that's right.
Now the only thing that's important is that baby.
Baby.
Like the future of that baby, the welfare of that baby, the health of that baby is all I really care about. Everything else is like, okay, whatever. I know like when you don't have that baby, then you can prioritize all these other things. But like once that baby is born, there's nothing else that I can possibly, that's it. So now I started to kind of like, okay, I have to make sure he gets the best life I can possibly give him. What's the best way for me to do that? What's the best guide that I can possibly have to do that? And the only thing I can come up with is the Bible. That's the only thing that will allow me to be not only a better father, a better husband, and a better overall person, right? Because that's really, those are my new life goals now, right? Is to be the best father I can be, the best husband I can be, and the best overall person I can be. Forget about my whatever, making more money at work or whatever my aspirations were before that, don't matter. Those are my new goals in life.
Right.
And the only way to really achieve those goals in my eyes, the best way to achieve those goals isn't by making up my own set of rules. It's by going by a set of rules that is tried and true for thousands of years.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I was like, you know, me and Kristen were like, all right, let's start going to church. Let's start, you know, like trying to, that's when I kind of made the decision at that point to start trying to walk in Jesus' footsteps and kind of be as close to him as possible as far as being the best human being I can possibly be.
Right.
Right. But also during this, I kind of had a revelation where I started to realize, and this was like after Hunter was born, because I don't know, I just always had, for some reason in my life, I always like everything was out of reach to me. Like, I don't know if it was not worthy or whatever it was. It just like, I could never, I would have like, all right, for example, the first thing that happened to me was Kristen. Me and Kristen met very young. When we started dating, she was 19 and I was 22, I think. Before, I worked with her before I started dating. And I remember knowing her and being like, I will never have a chance with her. Like, she is way out of my league. There's no way she's ever going to want anything to do with me. And then like, I would talk to her at work or whatever. And then, you know, I obviously I stopped. We both stopped, or I stopped working there before she did. And we kind
And
of
where were you working?
we worked together at Villamonte.
Oh, okay, that's right. That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, you know, she was always like, all right, this dream scenario woman I'll never be able to, you know, ever get even to take out on a date, let alone, you know, spend the rest of my life with, you know what I mean? So, and I remember at one point, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm going to try to talk to her, you know, try to take her out on a date. And she rejected me for a long time. She rejected me for at least 2 months, or she would not let me take her out on a date. And then
Brutal.
yeah, it was, yeah. But I had nothing to lose at that point.
You shot though.
Yeah,
I credit.
and then, yeah, you know, she finally, we, you know, we dated, I guess for like a couple months, and then, you know, we made it official, how, you know, whatever you do when you're that young and stupid. And then, you know, we've obviously been together ever since. Now I'm 30, so I'll be 37 tomorrow. So I'll
Oh, happy birthday.
thank you. So, you know, we've been together for 15 years, I guess. Yeah, a long time. But that was like the first thing where I remember, like, I can't believe I'm dating this girl. I can't believe we're together. And then even, you know, getting married to her was like, oh, no, she's actually going to marry me. I'm like, this is unbelievable. Because, you know, even when you start dating, I'm like, okay, she'll get sick of me in a couple months. I'll do something stupid. She'll realize she's with a loser and she could do much better. And, you know, like, that's always in the back of my head. Like, this relationship's never going to last because she's going to realize who I really am. So you get that, you know, so that just being in a relationship with her for that long was just crazy to me. And it just kept blowing my mind. And then it was like, you know, I get my dream job, which was crazy. It's a lottery. So I get that.
Best job in the city.
Yeah. And I remember, like, I'm like, damn, like, now I've got the dream girl. I've got the dream job. I'm like, this is just weird that I'm like, people would give their right arm for the girl of their dreams or the job of their, you know what I mean? Like, this is nuts that this just like kept happening. And then
It's almost like there's a supernatural being involved in this.
well, that was the thing. It wasn't until I looked back, right? Like, Hunter was born, and I remember like holding him. I remember like, and he gave me and I get a son out of that. I'm like, this is just nuts. I'm actually having children too. I'm like, this is everything I'm asking for, I'm just getting. Like, this is dumb. And of course I got the house too. I mean, there was just a lot of things where I had to look back and I'm like, no, I'm like, this doesn't just happen on coincidence. Like, this is crazy. Like,
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's when I kind of be like, all right, God is doing something here, because nobody just gets everything that they really ask for. Like, just, you know, a ridiculous revelation where I had to finally admit to myself that God was involved with almost every aspect of my life. So yeah, obviously then, you know, like I was going to church and trying to, you know, make myself a better person. And then it wasn't until recently, very recently, November, actually, I decided to actually read the Bible. So this is going to be a big topic for me, because I put off reading the Bible for years, and I would think it's a very daunting read. Obviously, it's very long, but I would just think, oh, it's going to be a difficult read. It's going to be boring. I don't want to read this. I'm not going to be able to pay attention. And it like was the greatest book I've ever read.
Wow.
I mean, just as a book, like, I mean, New Testament, you get the New Testament, you get the Old Testament, but just even reading the Old Testament, I mean, like, I couldn't put it down. It took me 2 months to finish it. I couldn't put it down.
That's amazing.
And I was like, that actually turned everything around just from November to now, because now I think about everything completely differently, because now I have all the information.
Right.
I've read everything. I've seen, I know the whole story. There's no like holes where I don't like, oh, I kind of know. And I mean, when I mean like before I read the Bible, I didn't know anything. I didn't know who John the Baptist was. People would be like, oh, John. I'm like, who the hell is that? I'm like, I don't know. Is that one of the disciples? I'm like, I don't know.
It's amazing.
I couldn't tell you basically anything about the Bible other than he was crucified and resurrected, and we celebrate Easter.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that was like all I could tell you, really. And like now I'm like, wow, how do I get other people to pick this book up? Because it's just not what you think it is the only thing I can try to like tell people is like, it's not. Well, first off, the main thing is there's just to break it down, because I actually wanted to do a whole breakdown on it, but I don't think a lot of people even know that there's different translations. So I think a lot of people, because I've talked to a lot of people and they're like, oh, that's where they talk like an old English. And I'm like, no, you're thinking of the King James version.
Right.
Like not nobody reads it, but it's a very difficult to read the King James version. You don't have to read that version. 12 other translations or however many translations after that, right? Like I got the easiest one because I was very scared of reading the book. So I got the New Living Translation.
Puts it in modern English. It's still a good, it's an accurate translation. It actually jives very well with the original languages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause now I know after, immersing myself that there's a lot of versions that people don't like, a lot of translate. Oh, they butchered the translation with this or whatever. So now I guess I have to like read other translations, but it is definitely a much easier translation to read. So it very simple. It's not hard. I don't, if anybody thinks it's going to be hard to understand, it's not hard to understand. So that would be like my number one thing to tell people. The other thing is, actually, if we can, I would like to do a whole breakdown, because this is something that bothered me. The fact that I didn't even understand the Bible as far as what it was as a book. Like, I think I knew maybe there was an Old Testament and New Testament, and the New Testament was Jesus Christ's life, and the Old Testament I couldn't tell you anything about. But what makes it a lot easier to read, or a lot less daunting, I guess, to start it, is that there's different books within the Bible, right? Like you get all these different, and then once you know what you're like getting yourself into as far as what this book is about, what this book is about, what this book is about, it becomes like, just having the knowledge, it makes it like a little bit less stressful, I guess. Like you become a little bit more comfortable with the idea of, all right, let me read the Gospels. I didn't even know what the Gospels were. People like, they would mention the word the Gospels. I had no idea what that meant. So it's like, yeah, now it's funny. I say all this now and I'm like thinking back to like, oh yeah, I found Jesus like 2 years ago. I'm like, I was an idiot. Like, what was I thinking? Like, I didn't know anything.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? So to break it down, there's the Old Testament and New Testament. I know this is probably gonna be frustrating for you because we're doing this in like baby steps, but I'm doing this for listeners who aren't at your church every week. So I want to make it, you know what? I should have took my other book because the other book is easier for me. Hold on a second. But if we're able to just break this down like really quickly, I don't want to spend a million years on this. So the New Testament, so there's Old Testament and the New Testament. The New Testament's roughly 250 pages. Old Testament roughly 850. Is that?
You guys, it depends. I guess it depends on the translation.
Yeah. So my book, I think the New Testament was about 250 pages. 250 pages is easy. I think I read it in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe.
That's rare, by the way.
What?
Just so you know, not to get off topic, but from what I've experienced, my conversion, whatever you would want to call it, I still believe it was a conversion, is very similar to yours in some sense. I had a little bit more of the emotional component behind mine than you did, but the same exact intellectual hunger to, I got to read the whole book. I did the exact same thing as you did. I just started reading I was like, I got to read the entire Bible. And then immediately after I made the decision to walk with the Lord and call my friend, like I said, I cracked open the book. I read from Genesis to Revelation, read the whole thing straight through. I didn't do it as fast as you, but I read the whole thing straight through. I've read the Bible straight through a few times, but most people's experience does not lead to, I'm going to read the Bible now, and I'm going to read it.
But it should.
It should. It should. But I also think that it's very, not to get too off track, I think it's a part of your gift mix. It's a part of the way that God wired you, and it's probably something that God wants to do in you so that he could use you in some capacity in the church, outside the church. What I'm saying is that it's a part of your gift mix. The reason why I say that is because you're wired much differently than your siblings.
Okay.
Very differently. I'm not trying to, I probably don't know any of you well enough. I don't. But what I would say is that I think that it seems like there's more of a actual logical component to everything that you do.
Okay.
Could that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
And it probably has to do with you having some kind of a teaching gift.
Okay.
Or an ability to articulate information in a specific way. Let me not put like theological terms on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd say that pans out. Sure.
Yeah. Anyways, go on. Sorry.
Well, like I was going to say, I actually read the New Testament before the Old Testament because it was shorter and because the Old Testament seemed extremely daunting to me.
I think it's a better idea too, by the way.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
I don't know what most people do because you just said you read it from Genesis.
I would start with the Gospels. Yeah.
Because I also feel that's the most important.
Yeah.
So, if you do decide to read the New Testament, right, you have the Gospels. The Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That is the story of Jesus Christ's life from birth to, actually, I'm not sure. Did they go? They go all the way to when he leaves.
Basically, you have his life. Essentially, you have some of his birth. Others are just the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus.
Right. Yeah. So, and also to understand this, because something also I didn't understand when I started reading the gospel was these are 4 different accounts from his apostles. So you get a lot of the same stories coming up, like a lot of repetition, I guess. So which I guess was kind of annoying at first, but obviously now I think it's interesting. You can kind of compare them and see. So everyone is different, but when they talk about events that happen in Jesus' life, there's obviously overlap. If they were there, they wrote it down. It's going to show up in multiple gospels.
Right. The reason
that's normal.
It's extremely normal. Yeah. No.
I didn't know that when I read that. I'm like, why am I reading the same story again?
So what you'll notice is that, so based on what I understand, based on tradition, Mark is the earliest gospel that's written. Matthew and Luke use Mark, being the earliest, as a template to write their gospels, but they also have their own sources that they add into the stories, and that's where you'll notice the differences, right? Like Mark is very brief in some areas,
right,
where Matthew is much longer. So you'll notice slight wording difference with certain stories, certain interactions that Jesus has had. You'll notice Luke will give, because they say that Luke was a doctor. If you look at Luke's account of Jesus in Gethsemane, it says that he sweat drops of blood because it's a medical condition. So if Luke is a doctor, naturally he's going to pull from more of his medical background to explain what took place there. And then John is written a little bit later. I think it's written a little bit later. Most scholars believe that John's written a little bit later. And there's a fuller Christology there. And John intentionally writes his gospel thematically. It's less chronological than the synoptics. And he writes it to give you a fuller picture of who Jesus was. And the reason why John is more different than the other ones is because I think John is intentionally doing that to showcase and highlight other parts of Jesus's life. So you'll notice Matthew, Mark, and Luke, very similar. They all track with each other very well. And then John is the one that's the most different from the rest of them.
All right. So after you get, so the Gospels are obviously the best place to start. Well, obviously, but in my opinion, they are. You would get into, so Acts are the Acts of the Apostles after Jesus Christ
covers the next 30. It covers 30 years after Jesus' ascension.
Right. And then now Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, these are all letters, right?
Yes.
So, and these are all, I don't want to say all of them, but a lot of them are Paul, right? Up until a certain point, up until Timothy.
Paul wrote 1st and 2nd Timothy. I mean, there's debate about it. There's debate, but yeah, I believe that Paul wrote 1st and 2nd Timothy. And so after the book of Acts, now you're getting into like the epistles of Paul and some of the other disciples. You got Peter. You also have what was I going to say? I'm not sure if you know this, but you know that Acts is written by Luke. Luke and Acts. Acts is a continuation of Luke's gospel.
Okay.
And you could even tell that by the intro. Luke, when you read the intro to Luke, he's writing a letter to somebody. It's like I think the guy's name is Theophilus.
Mhm.
It's like an apologetic. Like, this is everything that Jesus did and why you should believe in him.
Right.
And then when you get to Acts, it's, hey, in my first letter, I wrote to you everything that Jesus did, and this is what happened after.
Okay.
And it's his next letter. Sorry.
Okay. I don't want to go through each of these, but they're basically all letters. Most of them written by Paul. I remember up to a certain point, and then I think it was Peter and John.
Yep.
John's written by John. And then Revelation is
written
the
by
last
John.
book of the New Testament that's written by John, which was what was the story again? He was trapped on an island or something.
He was banished to the island of Patmos.
Okay.
There's a lot of legend. There's a lot of church history behind, what they said throughout church history was like they tried to put him to death, but they couldn't kill him, so they just left him on an island somewhere. I don't know if that's true.
But so what I was going to say was Revelation reads a lot different from Paul's letters and from the Gospels, because this is the only really prophetic book in the New Testament. The Old Testament has a bunch of these, but this is the one prophetic book where it's and let's say it's a dream or a vision of some type where God, I guess, really brings him into heaven and basically explains to him what's going to happen in the future. Is that summarize it the best?
I think
summarize it better than me.
So what I would say is the reason why Revelation reads very strangely is because the genre that the book is written. Each book of the Bible is written in a particular genre. Right. Some of them is like historic biography.
Mhm.
You got the Gospels, or Roman biographies. That's the Gospels. Then you have the epistles, the letters, the writings of Paul to the churches. Right. And then Revelation starts out in the first few chapters where it's an epistle to the 7 churches that are in Asia Minor, which is like modern day Turkey now, that John is writing to. And then it gets into these visionary experiences. And in those visionary experiences, the genre is what's called apocalypse.
Okay.
Which is basically the author is trying to convey to you something that is happening, going to happen, will happen in the future and whatnot. But he uses metaphorical apocalyptic language in order to do it. Like when he describes the devil, or he describes the devil as the dragon.
Right.
You'll see 7 heads, 10 horns,
Yes.
a beast, and this, that, and the third.
It's very symbolic.
Very symbolic.
Yeah.
Those things aren't real.
And it's almost to really understand what's going on here. People do like huge deep dives into these, try to like break them down and try to understand, well, this relates to this and this relates to this.
People have been going crazy over Revelation for thousands of years, and we still haven't gotten very far.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's all just theory, right? All right, so then now you have the Old Testament, right? So this was basically everything that Jewish people believe, right? Right, because everybody was Jewish before Jesus, and then Jesus, then you either became a Christian or you were still Jewish if you didn't believe in Jesus. So this is the Old Testament, is these stories that predate Jesus. You start with Genesis, which is the story of how God created everything, the Adam and Eve, the Noah's Ark, Abraham, right? Is that where I'm probably going to miss it.
Eventually you get to Abraham,
Right.
yeah.
And then Joseph too, right, is the end of Genesis, and then you get Exodus, is the story, Moses' story.
Yep.
Freeing his people from Egypt. Then you get the story of the 10 Commandments, how the 10 Commandments were in there, and the 40 years in the desert until they get to the Promised Land. So now, see, this is where I'm sorry, but I wasn't fully divulging myself into Leviticus because I was skipping around here.
Leviticus is a very hard read.
Yeah, it's the laws, right?
It's all Jewish law. Yeah, there's very little narrative in Leviticus.
Yeah.
So you don't get much storyline, and you get more of these just very strange law codes that to us seem like gibberish, but to them back then was very familiar in the ancient Near East. Like it all comes out of that.
And a lot of them are still followed today by certain Jewish sectors, I would say, right? Like
they can't practice the law the way that they used to since 70 AD. But yeah.
And now Numbers, I was trying to remember without looking at it, because I know they start off by giving you the numbers of all the people and all the tribes,
and which is hence the name,
right? Yeah.
So basically, you're talking about the first 5 books of Moses,
yeah,
and Numbers catalogs a lot of the law,
Mhm.
but there is also some very good narrative in Numbers. Like
Yes,
there's a
those
lot
are
of
towards the end.
there's a lot of explanation as to why Moses doesn't enter into the promised land,
Right.
why it has to be Joshua,
Mhm.
why the people don't enter into the promised land, and it's because of their unbelief. So, and that's part of the story where God, they're in the wilderness. We've been going through it at church, the book of Exodus, but God allows this generation that's in the wilderness that you see in the book of Exodus when you get to Numbers, that same generation, they have to die off. They die. That generation has to die in the wilderness before they can enter into the promised land. That's the next generation that enters in, and Joshua leads them.
Right. See, now the other thing with Deuteronomy, is it just me, or is I feel like they did a lot of summarization of what had happened in
That's
the books
exactly
before?
right.
Okay, all
That's
right.
exactly
Yeah.
right. It's basically I think it's 5 speeches. It's like it's basically like these 5 sermons or 4 speeches that Moses gives before they enter into the promised land. It's like his goodbye address.
Yeah.
Before God takes him.
Right. And then basically when you get to Joshua, so now you get Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Samuel 1 and 2, Kings 1 and 2. This is like the, prime story here. I mean,
Yeah.
this is where I couldn't put the book down, because now you get into all these really great stories.
Especially when you get to David.
Right. Well, I was going to say
Yeah.
Samuel is where you get to David, right?
Yeah.
And then Kings is Elijah.
Well, Kings has Elijah's in there. Elijah and Elisha are in Kings.
Right.
And then that gives you basically what happens when you get to Judges. Judges, the reason why it's called Judges is because it explains that essentially after Joshua dies, one of the mistakes that I think that Joshua makes is that he doesn't pick a successor. He doesn't pick anybody to lead after him. And so what happens is there are then judges that get appointed in Israel. But when you read the book of Judges, it does not paint Israel in a very good light.
Right.
It even says multiple times in multiple places. And everybody did what was right in their own eyes.
Right.
Sounds like the
Yes,
United States of
yes.
America, the secular West, right?
Yeah. Well, they fell away from God.
They fell away
Yeah.
from God. And then judges rise up, and they're supposed to be leading the people, but there's really only 2 good judges in the entire story,
Right.
which is Deborah and Samuel. And then when Samuel serves as a prophet before the Lord, and he's the mouthpiece to the people. And what happens is I'm paraphrasing
Right. No,
grotesquely.
that's fine.
Yeah. And basically in Samuel, the people say, like, listen, we want a king like every other nation.
Mhm.
We want to be like everybody else. Why don't we have a king? We want somebody physical who's there, who reigns on a throne. And God says, okay, you want that? I'm going to give you exactly what you want. And then that's when we get into the kingship of Israel, which takes off in 1 Samuel, and you see it through the book of 1st and 2nd Kings, and then the prophets that go before the kings. And again, you see some crazy wicked kings that come along that take the throne in Israel.
Oh, yeah. Have you been watching House of David, by the way?
Yeah.
That show is amazing.
Yeah, the show is
I just
sick.
got into it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I couldn't believe how good the show.
I've been dying for some like some good show on David. And like, of course, there's a lot of things in there that probably aren't accurate to the story, and they have to create backdrop. And
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. You
But
gotta
the
get
action
it
sequences and the fighting.
I know. I couldn't believe how well
dude.
it was.
I was locked in.
Yeah.
Locked in.
Very, very good show.
Yeah.
Chronicles, I feel like I remember that being a tough read. I can't even remember exactly what's in Chronicles now.
1st and 2nd Chronicles is rough also because the chronicler is recanting and adding things to the Samuel narrative. So you're seeing things that are very similar. And there's also like little added differences to it.
Okay. And then you get like a lot of short stories, right? Like this is Ezra and Nehemiah. I'm trying to remember. I remember Esther, I remember. Oh, and then Job's, I remember. Job is a particular story that's not really. So these stories they're kind of like now after everything that happened with I guess there's kind of a break, right, in the story.
Like with Job, like scholars, I don't think Job is they say it's the oldest book in the Bible. I don't think it's actually the oldest book in the Bible. The story goes back to it's supposed to be, it's being told about somebody who's, predates the law and so on and so forth. But so the story in and of itself, but the author, like when it was written, is not.
Right. Psalms are the songs that David wrote. So
there's a mixture. Yeah. There's some Psalms that David wrote. Some conservative scholars would probably argue that David wrote all of them. I don't think that's true, but he wrote a lot of them.
I was going to say, at the very least, he wrote most of them. And then the Proverbs are the sayings of King Solomon. I guess you would,
yes.
Word you would use to describe them.
I just want to say something real quick for anybody that watches this. The book of Proverbs is hands down, let's just say if you're a new believer, you're a Christian, and you want to start reading the Bible, you're going to start in the Gospels.
Right.
But once you've already become acclimated to the Gospels and the language maybe going to church, you're getting discipled, you've been to a couple of Bible studies before, bro, the book of Proverbs will change your life. I'm telling you, that book will father you.
Right.
If you grew up with no dad, and I grew up with no father, I'm telling you that the book of Proverbs can be your parent, because the first few chapters of the book, and even a few chapters after, they literally read like a parent talking to a child. It says, in the New Living Translation, it says, my child, and then gives the instruction. In the ESV, it says, my son, and gives the instruction. And I remember when I first started reading that, I was like, this is the fatherhood of God on paper. Like I have a dad on paper right now. This is incredible. If you just did what was in that book, you're going to be successful.
Right. And then what is it? Ecclesiastes is like kind of more of Proverbs, isn't it?
Yeah, there's like a lot of like musical proverb literature in there.
Yeah.
Some of it's a little sexual.
Song of Songs is the Songs of Solomon, right?
Yeah, and then Song of Songs is the ones where it's a little bit like, whoa, like what am I reading right now? But there's like a lot of like love language between like God and Israel, like essentially what you would see, like God and his bride.
Right. And then you get into the really tough reads, in my opinion. Was the Isaiah, the Jeremiah, the Ezekiel,
the prophets.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a tough read for me, just because the way it's written.
Yes.
Like it just felt like it was like reading the same thing over and over again, and just like it was kind of repetitive and also very descriptive, and it was just. I don't know. I was, I did my best through those. I told myself, because I was a big story guy. I wanted the whole story. I said, all right, I'm going to come back to Isaiah. I'm going to come back to Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and probably Revelation 2 and try to like really get into those. But I was like, I want to get back to the story. Like I wanted to read Daniel. Like I was, Daniel is which is also prophetic, but
super prophetic.
There's a lot of story in there as far as the whole story with him in the den of lions and all that.
Right. There's the major prophets, I would say, are difficult to read. If you're going to read them, even for me, you have to read them with I've already read through all of them and studied through them.
Yeah.
I have good Bible software. I'm also using AI now. I have tons of commentaries that I've spent a lot of money on. Like you need to know you need to know what the historical backdrop is to every single chapter.
Right.
To know what was going on in Israel at the time.
Right.
That's what the prophet is speaking to. Is he speaking to Judah? Is it Israel? All of those things are going to help enlighten you and open up your eyes to, oh, that's why he's saying that here. I could see why he's so hard on them because of what they're doing. Like there's a section in Isaiah I think it's in the first chapter where he says something like, don't come to me with your sacrifices with your arms raised high in the air. And the reason why he says that is because that was the way that they offered sacrifice to God. But the reason why was that they were offering sacrifices to Yahweh and to false gods. So he was like, don't come to me in the same way that you always come to me based on the law when you're doing the same thing to another God. But if you don't know that going in, you're going to read it and be like, this is just God's being really mean here. Yeah. You wouldn't understand it. And Daniel is, I'll tell you right now, if there's some books like that I would like struggle to preach through on a Sunday because I'm not as well versed as I should be, or that I still haven't really fallen on a position, like Daniel would be one of them. Oh, yeah. Daniel's a tough read. There's a lot going on there with the nations and what they represent, the timetables. It's a very tough read, but it's an amazing book.
Yeah. Well, because there's story in it, it was much more entertaining to me than trying to read through Jeremiah or Isaiah, there's a little bit of story in Jeremiah, I guess, and Ezekiel, but yeah, those are the toughest things. But what I'm trying to say by doing this, what I'm trying to say is skip around then. Like
skip around 100%. Yeah.
You don't have to read every single book if you're not, like I said, I was struggling with Isaiah and Jeremiah, so I kind of was like, all right, let me get to Daniel. I'll come back to those. And then the rest of them I think are very short, right? They're all like 2 or 3 page ones. So all the
minor prophets
Hosea,
are much shorter.
Joel, all those are pretty short. Those are just a couple pages. So that would be my Bible 101. So if you listen to this now, you know more than I did before I started reading the Bible. Mm-hmm. Now we could get into what I don't know what you would consider fun. For me, it's fun, but for other people, I bring these topics up, they get kind of uneasy and uncomfortable.
It's impossible. You're not going to make me uneasy.
Okay. All right. I would love to talk to you about Genesis, because when I read Genesis, I had no idea what I was beginning to read. I didn't know any background or anything like that. And I had a lot of questions.
Some Christian is going to watch this and be like, "You need to leave this guy's church. He's a heretic." I'm just letting you know that's what's coming right now.
You know what? It's just so funny how many people I don't like when people don't try to like think for themselves. And I think because it's religion, they kind of have this thing where it's like, no, I was taught this way by some religious historian or whoever said this, and now this is law for me. And it's like,
Right.
if you say something different, then you're not really Christian. It's like, dude, like that's not really, I'm reading the same book you are just because I'm thinking about it and you're not. Like,
Brother, I'm with you, and I have to say, I think that the fact that you're willing to ask those questions is like that's the way. Like,
okay, so we'll start with the main question. Have you ever seen the series Ancient Apocalypse?
no.
Okay, so it's a guy, Graham Hancock. He basically tries to find the earliest signs of human life form on Earth, right? I don't know if you're familiar with like Göbekli Tepe and all the
Yeah.
places like that kind of prove that he's actually proving it's been thousands of years even before what historians had before him, which is like a big topic because it kind of erases what a lot of other historians have done and they kind of attack him for it. But anyway, he's kind of gotten to a point where he proves that mankind has been on Earth for upwards of 11,000 years. So, according to historians of the Bible, people have only been here for 6,000 years.
Yeah, I disagree.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now now the 6,000 year idea comes from people, I guess, historians trying to figure out based on what it says in the Bible as far as the genealogy and the ages of everybody.
Right.
And then going back and saying, oh, well, if you follow it all the way back, because there's no years in the Bible. I don't think people understand that there's no years because we start with when Jesus was born.
Right.
So there's no years. So you kind of have to go by, okay, this guy lived to be, which is like a whole nother topic we can get into. Adam lived to be 900 years old. They kind of have to like go backwards from there and say, okay, it was 6,000 years or 4,000 years, I guess, prior to when Jesus was born is when mankind started. So now
It's problematic.
it's problematic.
Yeah, because they're interpreting the genealogies literally. And I don't know that you necessarily need to do that. Because when you remember, Genesis is written in ancient Near Eastern language, right? When you look at other ancient Near Eastern Mesopotamian texts, I'm not a Bible scholar, but from what I've studied and the data that I've looked at, you see that there are other genealogies where you have like, I think, don't quote me on this, I'm not a Bible scholar. I want to go ahead and say that. I think it's the Sumerian kings list or something. And you got kings that are living for 9,000 years.
Right.
Clearly, this is false.
Yeah.
And I think that the authors that wrote that knew that the kings didn't live for 9,000 years. So the question is like, well, why did they write that? It could have something to do with the nature of their reign. The number could mean something metaphorically. It could be symbolic. It could be that it's not actually like Methuselah living for 900 and some odd years. It could actually be that he didn't live for 900 and some odd years, but they're just letting you know that this guy lived for a very long period of time, right? They're called the antediluvian figures in the Bible, where they have these incredibly long lifespans. I personally don't believe that the author is writing that literally. I don't think that those are actual literal numbers.
Okay.
How much more do you want me to expand on this?
Well, what I'm saying is what you're saying is you don't think people lived as long as they say they've lived in the Bible?
So I'm saying that I don't think that you can use those genealogies as a way to measure humanity or human history, or as long as human beings have been on planet Earth. I don't think that's the best. I don't think that's the best tell, because you even see it in other ancient Mesopotamian literature where they have people living for thousands of years, and we kind of know that's impossible and doesn't jive right with the data in the Bible either, right? So I don't think that we could use that as the metric to gauge how old humanity is. I think that's problematic. But I also don't think that the author of Genesis, let's just say Moses, right? I don't think that he intended for us to read the book that way. If you notice something very unique about the book of Genesis, and this is where I'm going to get called a heretic. Just so you know, I absolutely believe that Jesus rose from the dead, is alive today, sitting at the right hand of God, and will come back one day.
I was going to start off the podcast by saying, because it's going to sound like I'm an atheist trying to argue with you.
But just so you know, I just want to let everybody know that, firmly.
I accept the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yes, I am absolutely in line with orthodoxy. I just think that when it comes to Genesis, what you will notice, and I will only go further as you probe me, so nobody throws stones at us, but the first 11 chapters of Genesis are very strange. Notice the first 11 chapters start off a particular way, and they bounce around these timelines,
Yes.
right? They just, before you know it, you have Adam and Eve, and then all of a sudden you have Noah, and then you have this story of the Tower of Babel that kind of just comes out of nowhere. And then Genesis 12, we get right to Genesis 12, and now we have the story of Abraham, where God is going to start doing a new thing, and how we know that the Messiah is going to come through, starting with this fella right here, right? And notice the timetable and the trajectory. That's where the story really kicks off, this storyline of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the generations, and then the kings, and then Moses, the Joseph, and then Moses, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Genesis 12 marks a absolutely drastic change in the way that the author is writing the story. So that tells me, and I think it tells many other scholars today, very well-respected Old Testament scholars, that you have to read Genesis 1 through 11 differently than you read the rest of Genesis. And I don't think that I need to take certain things in the book in Genesis 1 through 11. I don't think I have to take them literally. Certain things I don't think I have to take literally. I'm not saying it's false or that the people didn't exist, because I believe that they did.
Well, let's go into my next question. Who did Cain marry?
Okay, so now you're asking about whether other human beings on planet Earth and so on and so forth.
Yes.
You're going to get me in a lot of trouble here. I mean,
did I not say before I started?
Yeah, no, you're going to get me in trouble. But so this is
why people get uncomfortable.
This is what I would,
But, and this is kind of the thing where I go, okay, listen, you want to say, oh, it was another child of Adam and Eve. Okay, that's fine. But if you know the way the Bible's written, they're very particular at letting you know who's marrying who and why in as far as genealogy goes. They wouldn't, when I read it, I was like, well, if he married a sister from Adam and Eve, would they not say that? Like, wouldn't that be pretty, I feel like that would be a detail that they wouldn't just leave out.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
It's a good way to think.
What would be their purpose of leaving that out? It doesn't really make sense. Well, this is also the other thing. He's afraid that somebody might kill him. And it's like, who, his brothers and sisters? Like, what are we talking? Like, and it's like, oh, well, they don't give a timeline there. We don't know how old he is and how many more kids Adam and Eve could have had. And I'm like, I understand that, but I also feel like those details would have been written down.
Right.
So then we get into this whole question of, okay, did he just marry a sister from Adam and Eve, or were there other people?
Right. So the first thing that I would say is, like, one of the things that the skeptic would try to point out is that, isn't that incest if he married his sister or something like that?
No matter what, it's got to be incest.
Yeah. And so what I would say is that, I mean, let's say that is the case.
Right.
It wouldn't be sinful because this is something that predates the law. So it's something that would be permissible,
right?
In God's sovereign rule, in order for the outgrowth of creation. And also, what other choice would they have? This is my position, and there's other scholars that have it. I think that you could push the date of Adam and Eve. You could push them to like 700,000 years ago, 750,000 years ago. I think that Adam and Eve are the first human progenitors of mankind, in that they are endowed with a soul. They are created in the image of God, and they have a soul. I think that there's a supernatural component to the text in making Adam and Eve, in God making Adam in his image. Adam has a soul, right? He's a rational being. He's a rational animal. He has a mind similar to God, who's like an unembodied mind, so to speak, right? Now, that's not to say that there aren't other creatures that are walking around upright like Adam and Eve at that time. But I don't think that they necessarily have souls. I think that Adam and Eve are the first of that kind. And so now they have children, and their children have children. If their children have children with another upright species, whatever that would be, like a Neanderthal or whatever came before them or whatever, then they had babies, then those babies would have souls as a byproduct of the part of the humanity that was made in the image of God, i.e. Cain in this case, right? So that's kind of my position. So I could swing either way. I mean, if there's a very small pocket of people, it bottlenecks, whatever you want to say, or that there's other upright beings walking around, and so the soul gets passed on to those children based on Cain's line,
Right. So
I'm fine with that.
It's funny because when I read it, like the first thing I said when it said Cain, it's Cain goes and finds a wife in the land of Nod or whatever, and I'm kind of like, wait, what? I'm like, they were the only people. I'm like, what are they talking about? And then I kind of go back a little bit and I'm like, all right, what did I miss? Maybe I missed something here.
Yeah, you did it.
So one of the things I don't know if this is just a translation thing, but it actually never says that Adam is the first man. they never use the word first, at least in my translation. It says God created man and woman, but it didn't say the first man and woman. So I don't know. I've read books now. I actually just finished a really good book called Awakened by Daniel Duvall, where he kind of has these theories. And I can get into this one a little bit deeper because this is another topic I want to talk about. But he kind of believes in like these pre-Adamic wars, he calls them, where there were maybe not humans, but other things that were here before us. And there were these wars between them and between heaven. And it was a lot that went on before Adam and Eve. And that's this guy's theory, and he basically wrote a whole book about it. And
I've heard theories like that too, like the wars in heaven between the rebellious angels and so on. Like,
well, that's the whole
like
thing.
that.
Like if the serpent was Lucifer, then that comes from a war, right? Isn't that the whole theory? Is there was a war between the Archangel Michael through Lucifer down to earth or
depends
whatever.
on how you interpret certain passages. There's also a lot of very solid, sound biblical scholars that would say that the church tradition behind Lucifer, which would be, what is it? Isaiah, I think it's like Isaiah 16 and Ezekiel 27 or Ezekiel 28 or Isaiah 16, Ezekiel 28. I forgot which ones that describe the fall of like the king of Tyre and all these other kings that we interpret as metaphorically that the actual fall of Satan may not actually be the fall of Satan. I don't want to get too far off on a rabbit trail, but I guess what I would say is that the reason why I firmly believe that Adam and Eve were real people and that they are the first ones that have a soul that are created in the image of God is not just because of what I see in the book of Genesis, what I think the author's trying to detail, but Jesus believed it. And Jesus is God in the flesh, and he can't hold false beliefs, right? So when you read Matthew 19 and Jesus is having a conversation with the Pharisees regarding marriage, they're talking about, can a man divorce his wife for any reason? And Jesus said, Moses issued you a certificate of divorce because of the hardness of your hearts. He says, but from the beginning, it was not so. And he quotes the beginning, the first human married couple, which is Adam and Eve. So I think that I think Paul leans on, in Romans, I think both Paul and Jesus lean on Adam and Eve being the first humans that are created in the image of God, meaning they have a soul.
Right.
The first, in that sense.
All right, let's move into another fun topic. They use a little word in Genesis 6 called Nephilim. Now, I bought and I read most of the book of Enoch because I couldn't stop hearing about it and how it explained what Nephilim was.
Yes, it helps you interpret Genesis 6 because you understand what Jews in the intertestamental period believed about Enoch. I mean, about the Nephilim.
About the Nephilim,
yeah.
Right. So what you believe what is written in the book of Enoch is actually the story that explains the Nephilim. I mean, as far as the fallen angels lusted over the human women. The question I always get with this, which is, I mean, is aren't angels supposed to be spirits? How are they mating with human women? Is the question I always get.
Yeah. I think that I take Enoch. I think Enoch is not canon, so it's not doesn't have scriptural authority, doesn't have canonical authority. But from what I understand, Enoch was written. I would have been better at this if I was prepared for this interview. By the way, I just want to tell everybody I was not prepared for this. I think Enoch was written by multiple authors over a few hundred years. I think, from what I understand, that's like the majority of scholarship believes that it's by multiple authors over a few hundred years. And from what I understand, it comes from the intertestamental period, the Second Temple period when Jesus was alive also. So that gives us some insight into what they believed about Genesis 6. Do I believe everything that's in Enoch? I don't. I've only read through Enoch once.
Well, Enoch 1 is very different from 2 and 3. 3 is like...
I'm talking about, I'm just talking first Enoch. 1. Enoch 1. I do think that it is very enlightening into what's going on in Genesis 6 regarding the Nephilim. Mm-hmm. There's a scholar who recently passed away. His name is Michael Heiser. He's done a lot of work on this.
He's got a lot of books. Yeah.
He's got a lot of books. Angels, Demons, the Unseen Realm is another one where he really unpacks this. I think that the most traditional is that the Nephilim were these high-level ruling demonic forces or whatever these things are, and that they do actually mate with human women. Now, the question I guess you're asking is
the Nephilim is supposed to be the offspring.
The offspring. Yes, I'm sorry, the offspring of the Watchers that mate with the human women. And I guess the question is well, I thought, like you said, angels are supposed to be this or that. I guess like philosophically, is you have to kind of engage this philosophically, because theologically it's kind of hard. There's not
Right.
enough in the Bible to really pull from. But I guess that what we would say is that there was a period of time where God allowed for this sort of activity, or like there was a certain level of rebellion that was taking place at the time, and it was so grotesque. And the idea that I think you get from Enoch is that these watchers teach human beings how to be evil, how to do evil, right? And so then they mate with women, and they create the Nephilim. And interestingly enough, most people are very familiar with the story of Noah's Ark. The reason why God floods the earth is because of this act. Right. So it seems like there was stages in mankind's wickedness, however long it takes to get to wherever they were, and it got so bad to the point where God literally has to create a flood, a worldwide flood. Notice I said worldwide flood, not global, but he creates a worldwide flood, at least the world that they lived in. And he has to and he basically has to restart. He has to hit the clock again because of the level of wickedness. And then my guess would be, and again, I don't know this, and I don't think any scholar does. My guess would be is that God, in His mercy, after doing that, comes out, so on and so forth. I think that He puts a limitation on what they're capable of doing. Like there's some sort of limitation that takes place on what the angelic is able to do. Now, there's little tidbits in the New Testament literature that makes you wonder about what they believed in the Second Temple period, like the time when Jesus was alive and Paul was alive, what they believed about the Nephilim. Let me just tell you a quick story, not to get off on a side note, but in 1 Corinthians 11, the Apostle Paul is teaching the church at Corinth. He writes a letter and he teaches them how to have order in the assembly. And he talks about women wearing head coverings. And basically what he says, I can't get into all of it, but basically what he says is that women, when you get up and prophesy in the congregation and you get up and declare a word or whatever it is, whatever that word means, how people want to interpret that, when you get up and prophesy, make sure you have your head covered. And the reason why was because women's hair was a symbol of sexuality in the ancient world. And so if you had your hair uncovered, it could look like you were being immodest, or you were trying to throw it out there. Like, thank God Paul never saw girls with leggings. But in the ancient world, if your hair was out and it was long, it was a symbol of sexuality. There may even be like medical argumentation that they believed at that time that long hair had something to do with fertility. But Paul makes mention in 1 Corinthians 11, he says, and something like, be sure to wear your head covering, I'm paraphrasing, because of modesty and because of the angels. The question is like, well, wait a second. The hell do angels have to do with this? Like, what does that have to do with it? Some scholars believe the reason why Paul was saying that was because it's possible that he was saying that referencing Genesis 6, referencing the Nephilim, because maybe like Paul was unsure, like, hey, this could happen again. Like, don't do it. Is that going through Paul's mind? Like, we don't know, but it's interesting. So you see like little nuggets of information in the New Testament, even something in Peter that would make you think that, yes, the Nephilim story is exactly how we're thinking about it. The Watchers, they mate with human women and they create this offspring, the Nephilim. Supernatural.
And then the second question is, because this is a lot of things that I kind of want to see where you're at. Obviously, in the story of David, we have Goliath, who is supposed to be like the Nephilim, right? I mean, he's a giant.
I think he's a descendant from the Nephilim. Yeah.
Now, from the family of Noah, this is where it's
it's hard to know like for certain. There are some like, again, like there's a scholar like a guy like Heiser who he attaches, I don't know how true this is, but if you read him, he'll really get you interested in the Old Testament. Like whether his position is accurate or not, he will definitely get you to pick up the Old Testament like tomorrow. Okay. He has a theory, other scholars hold to it, that the entire Old Testament, especially going into like the conquest of Canaan, Joshua and Canaan. And there's certain, remember in the book of Numbers, there's giants in the land and Israel is afraid because there's giants in the land. And that is also a reference to the Nephilim, because they say like we saw descendants of so-and-so there. And there's like certain names in the book of Joshua that go back to.
They use like 4 different names, I think, for giants.
Like place names for giants and and there's even like literature that's written outside of the Old Testament that like attests to some of this stuff. And so Heiser believes that basically God puts a hit out on the Nephilim bloodlines in the conquest of Canaan. And
Okay.
he wants part of the conquest of Canaan is to have the Nephilim, these ungodly bloodlines that came from Genesis 6, to have them completely wiped out and removed. And that is part of what you see in David's life with Goliath. And if you notice, Goliath also has brothers, right? And David goes after the giants. He's the giant slayer.
Right.
Or they say that there's the like the family of Goliath. There's
Right.
and I think that eventually you get to a point. I think it's in 2 Samuel where it says that David wiped out the Nephilim. I forgot. Don't quote me on that. I could totally be wrong.
Are you? I don't know if you've read or not, but you're familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Mm-hmm. I haven't actually read.
Yeah. Well, they're fragments.
Yeah.
They're whatever it is, thousands of fragments of books. But they say that actually predates Jesus, before Jesus was alive, I'm pretty sure. The Book of Enoch is actually in them. They also have a fragment from a book called the Book of Giants, which I didn't even know existed. Right. It's kind of weird to see that these were like the oldest living, or the oldest pieces of literature we have, biblical literature on earth now, are from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then to have the Book of Enoch in that, I don't know. I guess I started raising the question was who decided what goes in, because there were more books, right? Like there's like Tobit, and there's like a whole bunch of other books that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls that aren't part of our canon. And who made the Bible? You know what I mean? Kind of like who decided, oh, okay, these books get left out, these books get added in. Like, have you ever done any research?
Yeah, this is a tough, you know what it is? I'm afraid to even like with Enoch, like the writing of Enoch, I don't know when Enoch was written. I'm pretty confident that it was written over the course of a few hundred years by a few different authors. That's what I always thought. But again, I could be wrong. But again, like with the intertestamental books, like Maccabees and all these things, a lot of this like Jewish intertestamental literature that's not in the scripture, I bet the church, certain traditions hold certain books as canon. Some of the ways that they come to judge whether or not the book is canon, from what I understand, is apostolic authorship. Like, was it written by an apostle?
Right.
Like at least in the New Testament.
In the New Testament, yeah.
Was this written by an apostle, or was it at least written by a very close associate, or somebody who has firsthand experience, or at least had firsthand experience, right? Like, I think it's Papias, who's an early church father, who says that the book of Mark is literally Peter's gospel given to Mark. Like, Mark pens what Peter says, I'm pretty sure. So, like, Mark was technically not an eyewitness, but it's coming from an apostolic source, according to church tradition.
Right.
Very, very close apostolic source, right? So that's one thing. And then the other thing would be the theology of the book. Right? Does the theology jive, I should say, with the other scholarship of the New Testament, and so to speak, right? So like that would be like an indicator. Like that's part of like canonicity, how they judge whether or not this book was written by this author or that author. Like, what's the theology like? Did it come from an apostle? Or did it come from a close associate, and so on and so forth. So the majority of the books that aren't in there are books that wouldn't be considered canon because they don't have that same apostleship. They don't have that same authorship. They're not as close to the original sources, or they came much later. Because if something comes much later, then they would consider it like there's just too much time in between here, so we can't use this.
Well, was that because they said that like that Mary from Magdala, she had a gospel or something, but it was discredited because it was written older or something.
Mary, Thomas, they have
Thomas too, right?
Yeah, they have like very strange things that happen in those books that don't jive with the rest of the New Testament. That's much earlier, written by people that are much closer. And so because of that, naturally they say, okay, we could get rid of this. And again, I'm giving you like a absolute bare bones, wishy-washy. Right. They have metrics that they use to measure this stuff that like you could lock it down with precision in the original languages as to whether or not this is accurate or not.
I was kind of interested. That's why I bought the 100-book Apocrypha, just so I had all the information.
It's awesome just to have.
Yeah, and then the other that was the other question I was going to ask you, because there seems to be a division on this too, as far as I mean, not like it makes that much of a difference, but so Moses writes Genesis, but where does he get that information from?
So I guess one thing you would say is that, let's say if Moses wrote it, that it's divine inspiration, right?
Right. So that's God telling him.
It's divinely inspired by God, right? But we'd be a fool to think that a human author didn't read books or know what was going on at the time in his day and age, right? So like the Pentateuchal author, let's say it's Moses, I'm sure that I'm not saying it's not, I believe in like the verbal plenary theory, that it is the spirit that is working through the individual, through his mind, through his ability to articulate. And so he writes it down. And I think that it leaves a lot of room for human authorship to create and to write. I think everything the Bible teaches is 100% true, but I think that Moses is using probably familiar data that he has at that time under the unction of the Holy Spirit to write what he has to write.
Yeah, because I see like the ways that people think of guys. One was that they were just stories that were passed down from generation to generation to generation, so everybody knew these stories or whatever, and he just
I think that's
wrote them down. And then the other one was, well, God told him to write all this down.
I think it's probably a mixture of both.
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
a mixture of both. It's probably stories that maybe God confirmed or helped shape, I guess, in some way. you
Yeah.
know?
And I think that, naturally, I think that God works through the author.
Mhm.
So it's different than like what Muslims believe about like dictation theory,
Mhm.
where every single word is specifically given to the person by God, where the person's just like a puppet, a marionette, and speaks exactly what God gives them. So that's why like I believe in biblical inspiration. And like I said, like the way I defined it was everything that the Bible teaches is true, is 100%. Everything that the Bible teaches is true. I don't think everything that the Bible literally says is true, because there could be little marginal errors in writing or scribal, flubs here and there, right? But everything the Bible teaches is 100% true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's all my questions for now. I'll think of something else. I'll try to make you sweat
Yeah.
again.
I wish I could have. I wish the next time I come back on, I'll try to come with.
Well, it's just a matter of like I try to like I'm kind of like talking through people, right? Because I'm talking to people about the Bible and they're saying, "Well, what about this? Well, what about this?" And I'm like, I don't have an answer for it.
Right.
But yeah, I thought maybe you'd be able to articulate, which you did. I mean, listen, you got some pretty good answers there. What was I going to say? I read up, so I said I accidentally I wanted to start reading more books about God and Jesus or whatever. I wanted to expand my knowledge as much as possible after reading the Bible. I happened to read a book, I'm going to say by accident, because I didn't really know what the book was. I was just kind of like finding authors and saying, okay, let's read this. I read a book about spiritual warfare, and that completely changed the way I looked at everything. So you're very familiar with this.
Yeah. My mom, her background in ministry started in what she would call like deliverance,
Right.
which is like what Jesus did, what you see Jesus doing in the New Testament, like with exorcisms. And I would even argue like deep emotional healing, certain people that have like backgrounds in witchcraft and other supernatural like paganism. So unfortunately, I have been very exposed to that at a young age. I think it's real.
It's
traumatizing.
Yeah. Well, so the book I read specifically, I mean, I read two, maybe three so far about spiritual warfare, about 3 books. I find it very fascinating because I didn't really know that much about, I guess, the spirit world, you can say. So Blake Healy writes these books. So he was born with God's gift of being able to see in the spirit realm whenever he wants. I didn't know that was a real thing. I think, and I mean, I believe him. I mean, the stories are amazing, but since he's able to constantly see all the angels and demons around us all the time, he can see everybody who has a demon, right? So the way he describes it is like there'll be like a demon that either like follows you or is on you, sitting on your head, your shoulder, whatever. He describes them all pretty vividly, but he can see why you have it as well. And now he basically says he doesn't always see in this. He can kind of like turn it on or off. The way he describes is like he can kind of like say, okay, I'm going to see in the spirit, and then he can kind of see all the angels.
And this guy's a Christian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Of the Bethel Atlanta School of Supernatural Ministry in Georgia. Yeah.
And this is an extension of Bethel Church in Redding, California?
I have no idea.
Okay.
You know more about that than I do. So he basically is able to help people based on seeing what their issue is and how to fix it type of thing, because he can kind of see why everybody has a demon or whatever. Well, at least that book, that's his 3rd book he wrote. I think the way he describes it in that book, he dealt more with demons. In like one of the books, he deals more with angels. And then another book, he deals more with like your connection with God. So he kind of has those 3 so far. I bought the other 2. I got to go back and read them now. But I thought it was very interesting. I don't know if you ever heard anything like that, but it was
the only thing that makes me a little nervous This is the only thing that makes me nervous when people say these things, is that I'm not saying that he's lying. I don't know the guy, I'm not familiar with any of his stuff. Paul lists in the scripture, in the New Testament, you see this in the writings of Paul, you'll see primarily you see it in 1 Corinthians, you see it in Romans, you see it in Ephesians, probably not doing it all justice, but he mentions certain spiritual gifts. Now these are charismatic and like supernatural and non-supernatural gifts, all that come from God, that are given to the church for the flourishing of the body of Christ, like for the church. And some people have certain gifts. It seems like what this guy would be highlighting is that he has the gift of what would be called, I guess, the discernment of spirits, and probably like some kind of gift of prophecy / word of knowledge, word of wisdom, where you have some sort of supernatural insight into the spirit world. I don't think there's any specific gift there's no specific gift in the New Testament that's mentioned where you could see a demon on somebody.
Right.
But I'm not saying that that's not possible. That could fall into the discerning of spirits, I guess. It's possible. But I would just be very cautious with authors that say that I could turn it on like a switch. Like that's the only.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I would have to read his. I would have to read his stuff.
Yeah, it was funny though because I have a friend who he was Christian his whole life. He goes to a Pentecostal church every Sunday or whatever. But he was like, because I was reading this book, I was telling him, I was like, yo, I'm reading this book. He goes, yeah, so he goes, I've heard about that. But I know the Pentecostal is very Holy Spirit oriented.
Yeah. So and my mom came up from the Pentecostal movement, Pentecostal charismatic movement. I just think that one thing that the charismatic church has to be very cautious with is overemphasizing or sensationalizing spiritual gifts. Again, I'm not saying that this guy's not telling the truth, but hopefully he's under accountability. Whereas, like for instance, if I said to you, hey, Danny, I got this gift that I could turn on and off, and at any point in time it's on or any point in time it's off, then I should have a resume behind me where other people could say like, oh, right, Mike has the gift, because anytime he looks at somebody and says they're struggling with this, they're actually struggling with it.
Well, that's I mean, it would be easy to call this guy a fraud then, right? Like that's kind of like why I was like, well, if everybody's saying he can do, he's got to have a record here that's spotless, or else people would have outed him already and said, all right, this guy can't do it, because what he's claiming to do is he's claiming to have meetings with somebody and they're saying, hey, I've got an issue, and be like, yeah, your issue is this, and then this is what you have to do, and he's helping them through
that sounds that's very similar to like a prophetic gift where they have some sort of prophetic insight.
But he describes in detail the way he sees it, because it's all about him being able to see through what the demon, like the demon's always doing something specific that he's seeing that gives away what their problem is, whether it's shame or guilt or like whatever their issue is. Like, and according to him, he's had encounters with Jesus. Jesus shows up to his house and takes him on to like shows him things. Like, I mean, who can verify that? But I mean,
it's hard to quantify. I'm not going to say that it didn't happen.
Right.
You can't say it didn't happen.
But then it's crazy because I read this other guy, Daniel Duvall, like I was saying, he wrote the book. His whole thing was he can summon your spirit and talk to your spirit. So people who are like super troubled, he'll have these meetings with people who, basically his whole thing is like, all right, your spirit could be broken. It could be lost. It could be being held hostage by a demon or whatever. And he sits down with these people and he's able to actually bring your spirit out and talk to your spirit through you. And he says through these conversations, I think he listed in one chapter, he lists 10 different scenarios, meetings that he had with people where he talked to their spirit or whatever. And like, I guess kind of like as examples, and kind of that's how he gets, he's saying he's obtaining knowledge about these pre-Adamic wars through their spirit, because what the spirits are telling him is that when you're born, the spirit was alive for thousands of years before you were born. Like so his whole thing is like you have a body, a soul, and a spirit, are 3 different things.
Trichotomous, yeah.
Right. So the way he explains is like your spirit is alive, your soul and your body is born, your spirit enters your body, but it depending on what the history that spirit has been through could mean for whatever reason that you have whatever issue you have in life, whatever it is. And then he's able to help these people by either fixing their spirit or healing their spirit or finding their spirit or whatever. And he's got some pretty crazy stories about that too. But yeah, he's kind of goes into a lot of detail about like these. He says the one common denominator by talking to all these spirits is like there were these pre-Adamic wars that were going on between heaven and all these other different types of beings on earth, whether you want to call them, not alien, but whatever they weren't like exactly what we are. They weren't human. You know what I mean?
The only pushback I have with that is that sounds eerily close to paganism. It sounds eerily close to witchcraft. I don't see anywhere in the scripture where Old or New Testament where summoning spirits is not considered necromancy. And under the law of Moses, they killed you for it. That to me seems a lot like paganism. It seems like necromancy. This is why I was saying, like, this is where, like, I think, like, a lot of charismatics, they go a little too far and they start to dive into paganism. They could fall into witchcraft. We've seen this before in the church. So I don't have any scriptural reference for that. The only scriptural reference that I have in talking to spirits is that, Moses killed you for it. Now, the other thing is that he's saying that, well, I'm talking to your spirit. And that this, like he said, like he could talk to your spirit. There's nothing in the scripture that says that your spirit is alive before you or thousands of years before. There's nothing in there. So where he gets that from would have to be his own knowledge or revelation or something else that he studied outside the scripture. But I also have a problem with the notion that you consist of a body, soul, and a spirit.
Okay.
And the reason why is on a philosophical level. Now, the scripture says body, soul, then it uses another phrase, body, soul, spirit. And so there's something called trichotomists, people that believe that a human body has a body, a soul, and a spirit. And there's a dichotomist, which is the notion that you have a body and a soul.
Okay.
And that that is the part of your soul that is in contact with God, or is the part of your soul that is the redeemed portion of your soul that interacts with God. The problem on the trichotomist view is that, and again, I don't mean to get too deep, but I'm just saying, like, in this guy's, for what we were talking about, like, who am I? Like, who is Danny? Who is the I? Like, when I say, hi, I'm Mike, or hi, I'm Danny, the I is my soul, right? It's the thing that embodies this body. It's the immaterial me that embodies this flesh suit, right? If I have a soul and a spirit, who's the I? Because I can't have two eyes. So when he says he's talking to your spirit, I mean, if you're talking to my spirit, I mean, I'm talking to you right now. Right? Oh, well, that's your soul. Okay, then who's my spirit? And then who am I?
Right.
If I have a soul and a spirit, you're saying I have two eyes, so there's two of me. So like I think you kind of fall into like a philosophical problem. It's a little bit of like a logical conundrum there, which is something that I would always pose on the trichotomist if we're having like a theological conversation. But I would even say the exact same thing to him. Like if you're having a conversation with my spirit, how is it possible that I don't know about it? And then who is the I? So that's the only place I would push back. Again, I can't sit here and say that the guy's a fraud or he's not actually saying what he's saying. I would never say that, especially without even touching his material. I'm going just off of what you're saying.
I'll give you the book. You can check it out. I've already read it.
But that's interesting. I guess I would say that, whatever revelation he's getting, that doesn't come from scripture. So that immediately would raise a red flag for me. Whereas I'm like, I'm just saying, just be careful with some of that material.
No, I mean, the only reason why I like reading, especially these guys, they quote scripture throughout the entire book, like almost every single page.
Yeah, I'm going to check it out.
So yeah, I'll give you that one and the other one if you want to check them out. I already read them, so it's, I don't know. I don't really have any, I don't need them back anytime soon, but, I actually gave that book to, Brandon too. Brandon's got that book too. I wanted to see his take on it, but,
I absolutely believe, by the way, in spiritual warfare. I think that the spirit world is 100% real.
Right.
I think that that demons definitely, that's why the Apostle Paul says we don't do weapons against. We don't fight in the flesh with swords. We fight in supernatural places, you know, and that's why you have to put on the full armor of God so that you can withstand the enemy. I think for sure. I mean, I would even go as far as to say, like, I'm sure that there are demons or supernatural beings that like maybe even get assigned to you to try to harass you and bother you and and you have to combat them. So I don't doubt any of that. I believe that people can be oppressed by demons greatly. They could be demonized. I've seen people get prayed over where they will literally get like supernatural strength. I've seen a woman 5'3", 115, 120 pounds soaking wet, throw grown men around, throwing them around in the front of a church. Just get up off a floor and just throw them off of her.
You mean being possessed by a demon or being possessed by?
Yeah. I don't like the term possession because I don't think the actual term possession is used in the New Testament. I think that demonization is the proper term. the proper Greek term, but I think that, yeah, demonic forces can influence people to a point where, they even develop strange supernatural like strength. I believe in all of that. I would just push back on a few of the things that you detailed with this other guy, with talking to a spirit, the spirit being alive, only because we really don't have much scriptural reference for those things.
Yeah, I don't know anything about this. I'm learning as we go. Yeah, I mean, my weakest points right now are praying, learning how to pray to God, and learning how to hear from God. Those are like my two main things. But yeah, the spiritual warfare thing I thought was a pretty crazy concept. It kind of made me look at things a little bit differently, I guess, when you realize there is a spirit world that you need to that you need to be ready to combat on a day-to-day basis.
Time.
Well, I think it's a lot of like mind manipulation stuff, right?
Mhm.
It wants you to think something that's wrong, and you think it's you think it, and it's really like the enemy manipulating the way you
Influencing
think,
you.
right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Like I'll give you an example, like something that I've always struggled with, even up until recently. And I'm an open book.
Mm.
I don't want to ever give off the illusion, and you may have even noticed this like when I'm preaching. I don't ever want to give off the illusion that I'm Superman, and that I don't need help,
Right.
because that's a lie.
Yeah.
And something that I always struggled with was, I grew up, my dad was never around.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I was a little kid, my mom, no one knew how to really handle the situation because it was kind of grotesque. And so my mom would always tell me like, yeah, your dad's going to come home soon. Like, he'll be home soon. And I'm like 3, 4, 5, asking these questions. Where's my dad? When's daddy coming home? And then, so point being is that I was always waiting for my dad to come home,
Right.
but he never did. And
Right.
so you develop this anticipation anxiety that he's going to come home. And he never does. So now there's the anticipation and anxiety just building and building and building. Then I find out dad's never really coming home, right? But at that point, I have years of this anticipation anxiety and years of built up disappointment that's already in the tank. The enemy uses that. He's preyed on that my entire life. And I've developed, over the years, I developed a very, very negative, I mean, about glass half empty, I'm talking glass knocked off the table, broken, the water spilled everywhere, mentality and perspective, and that the enemy would use, and he would constantly use that and plague me. And he preys on that woundedness. And that woundedness is an open door for the devil to come in and wreak havoc on you, which is why the Apostle Paul says in Ephesians, I think it's Ephesians 4, where he says, do not give a place to the devil. And I think that word place in Greek, topos, it can mean like a physical location, right? And so I always thought, like, do not give a place, a physical location. Don't let him get between your temples, because he'll destroy you.
Yeah.
That's why Paul says, put on the helmet of salvation. It's part of the armor of God, right? So when you said, like, I'm trying to figure out how to pray, learn how to pray, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Prayer is just communing with God, talking with God. And I think it's something that's caught. You kind of can't really teach somebody how to pray. The more you talk to the Lord, the more you're around people that know how to pray, that you hear people pray, you're going to catch on to that. And so if you don't know what to pray, you can always pray the scripture, because it's the divinely inspired word of God. So you can say, Lord, I'm going to work today, and I put on the full armor of God, like the Apostle Paul mentions in Ephesians 6. And right now I put the helmet of salvation on my head. Protect me from poor thinking, poor choices, give me wisdom, so on and so forth, right? Like that's right where to start. You could start right with the word. And that is a form of spiritual warfare. You're priming yourself spiritually. You're priming that part of you that is redeemed before you go to work. You could pray the same thing for your children. I put the armor of God on my kids. I put the armor of God on my wife right now in Jesus' name. Even though I'm not there, I know that the angels are protecting her. I pray Psalm 91, which is a protection psalm. I pray Psalm 91 over my wife and my children. And God, I thank you that you're going to protect them.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. That's again, spiritual warfare. Not as sensational as being able to see demons and know what someone's struggling with.
No, I'm just saying in a term of like, I feel like you hear people like you pray or other people pray, and they've got like these grand things to say memorized all the time. And I'm like, when I do it, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I obviously I pray for the health and safety of my children and my family and friends and all that stuff, basic stuff, but I don't know. I guess I got to start like memorizing certain things in order to like get better at it or something. I don't know.
No, I think it's really, it's just a matter of time. I think it's just time. It's like anything else. It's just time. The more you do it, the more practice, the better off you're going to get at it.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that's the case with it.
I mean, you think about it, really. I mean, how long would you consider yourself a Christian for?
Well,
Yeah.
that's another
You know?
an actual I don't know. I mean, that's what I was saying before. It was like, yeah, I was telling myself I was a Christian 3 years ago, but I didn't know anything. So what was I really doing? Like, you know what I mean? At what point do you say, okay, now I'm a
Right. But I just think of it like this. Let's just say it is 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Technically, you're 3 years old.
Yeah.
You're 3 years old into
I
the
know.
new life. I mean, think about a typical 3-year-old. What do they know?
I have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah. I mean, and then soon you'll be 20 years old and the Lord will be like, man, I don't know a damn thing. It's so funny.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah.
But your story is so, I don't want to give away too much information here, but every time I talk to Rob,
Yeah.
or I talk to Emma,
Uh-huh.
the both of them have the same reaction to your salvation.
Yeah.
Both of them said to me, they use the exact words.
What, they thought I was going to hell, right?
They said, yeah, Danny. It's always roughly the same thing. It's always, yeah, Danny, wow, it's a miracle.
Yeah, it's pretty true. Well, I think it was just my stubbornness about the idea of it. But the crazy part is, like, I mean, in relevance, how many people think the same way that I thought, like that's like my whole thing with this is, like, I feel like I have almost a responsibility to break down the way people think and explain Christianity to them, or finding Christ, however you want to put it, in a way that doesn't sound as crazy as I thought it sounded. Like, you know what I mean? And I feel like if there was somebody that could have explained it to me in a way where it made me think of it a little bit differently, I don't know. I mean, maybe I could have, I could have came to Christ when I was 20 instead of when I was whatever, 34, I don't know.
Right.
But it's, I feel that, like, nothing against, like, any churches in particular or anyone, but, like, nobody really tries to do that. Like, nobody tries to find that formula of, and I know it's probably very specific to my demographic. I think somebody in my position is probably in the easiest position to adopt Christianity, or just to pick up the Bible and start reading the Bible, because I was raised Roman Catholic. I have kids. I want the best for my family. So, you're in this position where you're like, I already have the background of the church background, and now I have something that I really need to protect, and I need to make sure that my kids have the best life. That demographic's got to be, I would think, 100 times harder to get an 18-year-old kid to find Christ. But then again, that's when you found it, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. All I know is that the mentalities of the way people perceive it, are probably exactly the way I perceived it. And that's, like, another reason for me to sit here and do this, was to, like, get people to kind of, like, think about it maybe a little bit differently. You know what I mean? Like, this is how I thought about it. I thought, whatever stage you're thinking about it, I already thought about it. I was already there. I just did that. I 100% get it. I understand, you don't think it's logical, or you don't think you need it. I don't know. I guess, like, my advice to be someone who, because I mean, that's the thing too. I guess my advice to somebody who doesn't think they need it, well, then I guess you might as well think of it as insurance policy, because when shit hits the fan, like, that book's got all the answers. You know what I mean? That's one of the only way I can kind of try to describe it in a way that would make somebody want to read the Bible, is eventually something not great might happen, and you might not have the answers, and that book does.
Yeah.
So
That's big.
why not get ahead of it? You know what I
Get
mean?
ahead
Why
of it
not
now.
know the answers before that happens?
Right.
Or whatever. You know what I mean? That would be my best advice for it. Like I said, I had to take baby steps. It took my brother and sister a couple of years, and it took me, I don't know, close to 15 years, maybe 12, 13 years. So it's, it's something where for a long time, I just thought, religion was for somebody who, they have issues, and, they've got problems in life that they can't solve on their own, and they need help, and this helps them. And that was, like, kind of the way I looked at it. You see somebody, oh yeah, I'm born again. It's like, all right, well, you're born again because you had some real problems in that first life, and now you want to start over. That was the way I looked at it.
Right.
And it shouldn't be looked at that way. And hopefully, like, I pray to God that, like, my kids grow up and don't have to go through the same steps that I had to take to get there. Hopefully what I'm doing will help them realize that God is real, and everything in that book is 100% real. There's,
It will.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're doing everything right. You know, you're giving them the truth at a young age. You're building the
I'm
foundation.
trying to do everything right.
Yeah.
I'm
But
not I'm not perfect.
yeah, and neither am I. But and granted, we will never gonna be able to do things perfectly, but we can always do things with excellence.
Right.
And, you know, you're very fortunate that you grabbed hold of this at the time you did, and
Mhm.
now you're able to raise your children in it. It's funny because I've had a lot of conversations with people where they say, you know, just like you said, well, I really don't need it. And this is something that, you know, maybe somebody, if they're struggling and they'll need something and, you know, then they'll find religion and,
Right.
you know, I guess like where I try to push people when they give me that response is that, and I will ask them, are you in life, are you on an earnest pursuit for truth? And most people don't really even know how to answer that question
Mhm.
because they're actually not really concerned. Our culture the enemy has done such a great job of distracting people with menial nonsense and getting human beings to chase a carrot on a stick. I just want to get money, have sex, and buy stuff. And that's it. I just have to be as comfortable as possible and achieve this dream, American dream, whatever you want to call it. But when you actually sit down and you probe people, like, are you on an earnest quest for truth? And if they say yes, and it's like, well, don't you think that the existence of God would be the absolute greatest, you know, news that there could possibly be, or the greatest truth overall? Like God is literally the embodiment of truth in and of itself if he does exist. Like, well, yeah, you know, well, wouldn't you want to start with the bedrock of Western civilization?
Right.
Like the thing that created the greatest civilization of all time? Wouldn't you want to start with that? I think it's a pretty good start, no?
Right.
And that's when you really get to see where somebody's head is at, whether somebody has an actual intellectual problem with the
Yeah.
truth. They have an emotional problem. Maybe they had problems in life and they're just turned off to the notion of God. Or some people are just intellectually lazy and they're just enjoying the distraction.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of things people feeling like I guess that was kind of a feeling too, the not worthiness, like, oh, God doesn't want anything to do with me, you know, I made too many mistakes, like he, you know, that type of
Yeah.
thing, or
Talk about that not
um
understanding the cross.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I didn't. But or, you know, I think a lot of it is well, none of my friends are Christian, none of my family is Christian, what will they think of me? Type
Mm,
of thing. You know? That's something that
that's huge.
I know that's and it's funny because I never think about that because I never really cared what anyone thought of me, and I never really thought of it as I guess I never really think about it too much myself. Well, other people will be like, you know, you really don't care what people. I'm like, no, like you know how hard it is for somebody to adopt that mentality to just walk around and not care what anyone thinks.
Yeah.
So I think that obviously made it a lot easier for me. Like I have no problem. You could say whatever you want about me. It does not affect me whatsoever. Yeah, but I'm sure that's a big thing for people. You know, how will all my family and friends think of me if I decide to adopt this religion? They won't think of me the same or whatever. Yeah,
That's gruesome.
I was trying to go through all the different ones. That was one of them too, right? Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. In my head, I'm like, I feel like if we can somehow figure out a way to like get through to people, you know that those things don't matter, and you know what matters is the Bible and the Word of God, and that your life just becomes so much easier too. You know, like I know it's a hard sell, but
I
like
agree with you.
I don't know. 100% now that like everything is in God's hands for me, right? Like my faith is 100% in him. Like I don't waver at all. So like I don't worry about anything. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying I make dumb decisions, but I don't really have the stress that I used to have about stuff. I don't really have like any anxiety. Like a lot of it is just like, yeah, you know, my kids drive me crazy, but like
Right.
in real life situations, it's like nothing's really worth getting upset or worrying over anything like that. So I just don't. I just kind of like, yeah, God's got it. Like I don't have to worry about anything that would normally cause me any type of stress or discomfort, you know, and that's kind of like a big sell too. I mean, it's a hard sell for people. I don't think people, you know, that's not something that everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, like give me that or whatever. They're going to what?
At the same time, what you're saying is invaluable. That's worth more than anything. Peace. You have peace.
Peace of mind.
You can't buy that.
Yeah.
You could have all the money in
But
the bank and not have peace.
it's not easy too, because in order to get that, you really have to have faith, right? Like, well, what was I heard some today that was really good. I listened to a lot of Joe B. Martin, is one of my guys I like to listen to, and he was saying something like, "It's one thing to believe in Jesus; it's another thing to put all your trust in him."
So,
Right? Because that's not as easy as believing.
yeah.
You can believe that he lived and died on the cross for your sins and the whole nine, but are you able to put all your trust in him is the hard part,
Yeah.
right? That's the hard part. You have to hand everything over, you know? But honestly, that's what makes life so much easier when you hand everything over and then you're able to just live life with, you know, without those worries and just know that he's got you. You know what I mean? Life becomes so much better.
No,
It's so much more full.
I completely agree. I think that, especially for you, I think that your testimony is going to be very powerful in your family, because I think that there's going to be people that are going to look at you when they go through a hard time, and they're going to say, you know, they're probably going to struggle and wonder, like, why is God allowing this to happen and all that, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to look at you and they're going to be like, I remember Danny used to really doubt and he's solid as a rock right now. And like, that may be something that people like your testimony alone could be something that somebody could hold on to, and that could drag them to the finish line, you know? That's why I think of Emma and I think of Rob when they were like, yeah, it's a miracle. And I'm just like, yeah, it may be more than you even think in the future.
Yeah. And now look how deep I'm going into this.
Yeah.
I'm going crazy with this.
Like I said, though, but I think like if, you know, especially if you feel like this is something that you want to do and this is going to be an outlet for you, like to me, then it becomes patently obvious. Like this is a part of your gift mix. This is a part of what God wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the hunger is your gift mix. Like that's why you're diving into all these things and Enoch and Genesis, and you want the questions answered.
I want everything answered. Yeah. But
because you want to be able to give the truth to somebody else.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's, I don't know. For something, there's just something in my head, and I don't know really how to explain it, but it's like a constant, like, hey, everybody else has to know what you know type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
That's
mean?
it. That's
like this constant thing in my head. And and all day I'm like, it's like trying to figure out a puzzle. I'm like, all right, how do I do that though? You know what I mean? Like I've got to figure out some way that makes sense, because everything that was tried on me didn't work. So I know all those things didn't work. Right. So you got to have to like break down the mentality. What made me take one step? What made me take the second step? Right. Like, you know, I try to think like the biggest thing is like just for people with families, like do it for your kids, man. Like do it for your children.
Yeah. My word for it, for the account of them.
100%. Yeah. Listen, you know, that's kind of how it started with me. I was like, I want to be the best father. I'm like, this book is the only way that they're going to have the best life. I have to go through this. Like, you know what I mean? That was like a big sell for me on it. And then like, once you obviously read it and then realize, you know, that's what I always say. I'm like, if everyone just sat and read even just the New Testament, like how many people are going to come and argue with me and be like, I don't think it was real. I'm like, you know, it's almost impossible to read the Gospels and be like, I believe it.
Yeah. I think the devil will do anything he can to get somebody to not pick up that book.
Of course.
When you read the words of Jesus.
But that's also why I wanted to break it down.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it easier for people to understand what they were picking up. Because like I had no idea. When you know, somebody breaks something down for you, all right, well, this is kind of like what you're going to be reading. This is how it breaks down. The New Testament's only 250 pages. Start with the Gospels, nice and easy. You know, buy the New Living Translation so you don't have to worry about not being able to understand what they're saying.
I'm 100% with you.
You understand what
Yeah.
So I was kind of why I wanted to do that. Like I said, I've been trying to organize my thoughts for like 2 weeks now, trying to like make sure that we covered certain things that I felt were like super important. And that was one of the things that I kind of felt were really important, because if somebody had broken down the Bible for me, I probably would have picked it up a lot sooner.
Wow. But bro, I got to be 100% honest with you. Like kind of like for real though, like shame on the church in some sense. Because
the Catholic Church? Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Like I think just there's I know a lot of people grew up, they said the same thing. I asked my pastor this question and he didn't know how to respond. It's like, it's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Like, I wish that, you know, it's so funny because I remember when we first got reconnected, we were in Brandon's backyard. Mm-hmm. I was like, I know this guy from somewhere. And you were like, I think the barbershop. I was like, my God. I was getting haircuts from Joey for years and you were right next to me. And, you know, I run into a lot of people that way though. It's so funny. I wish you know, obviously God had a plan, but if I would have known now, you know, what I know then, I would have been trying to chop it up with you right then and there.
Oh yeah.
Those conversations just never came up.
Well, that's also why I was kind of asking you, because I'm like, I don't remember you like preaching at all or anything anytime you were in there or talking about God or anything like that. I was like, I wonder if he was, you know,
that was more early on. I probably didn't have the answers that I have now. Right. Not that I'm this well of knowledge, but
how old are you? 38?
6, I think. I think I'm 36. Yeah, I'm 36. I'm 36. Yeah.
But you turned 37 this year.
I turned 37 in May.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I turned 37 tomorrow. So yeah, well, you went to, where'd you go? You went to Gateway?
School?
Yeah.
I went to Mary Queen of Heaven in Brooklyn. It was a Catholic school. It's
Oh,
no
okay.
longer there when I lived in Brooklyn.
Mhm.
Then when we moved to Staten Island, I went to Gateway. And then I went to a Christian college prep school in New Jersey. My mom wouldn't let me go to school in Staten Island. She wouldn't let me go with my friends.
But Gateway goes all the way through high school?
Now it goes through high school, but back then it only went to the 8th grade.
So where did you go for high school you went to?
High school, I went to high school in Jersey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying college.
Yeah. And I didn't get into, I mean, not that I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Like, I don't know how much time you have, but I remember when I first became a Christian, I didn't have, I mean, I had a foundation, but I didn't have any intellectual like muscle whatsoever behind the faith. And I remember one time my friend Aaron, who kind of took me under his wing, he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go to my friend's house." This guy, Guillaume, he lived on Staten Island at the time. He's actually a famous Christian philosopher now. Guillaume.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy. He goes, "We're going to go to Guy's house and we're going to watch this William Lane Craig debate." And I was like, "What's a William Lane Craig?" And he was like, "William Lane Craig." He's like, "He's the world's greatest Christian apologist. He's like the greatest defender of the Christian faith. He like has debates with atheists all the time and kills them." He's like, "We got to go watch the debate." I was like, "Okay." I didn't even know that this existed.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Once I got acquainted with like Christian apologetics and like sound arguments for the faith, scientific arguments for the faith, historical arguments for the faith, philosophical arguments from the faith, I was like I've lived under a rock.
Right.
Like we have all the tools and the ammunition stockpiled. I hope that even after this, I hope that like your journey is similar. I could try to point you in the direction of resources I think that will like light a fire under you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, I take book recommendations. I got a whole bunch to read. Right now I'm reading a book, Raymond Ibrahim. Ibrahim?
I don't know who it is.
So he did a 3-book series on it's basically the Crusades, the history of when Islam had started and the wars between the Christians and Islam. I think like the first book is like obviously the beginning, and then I think he does a 3-part series, and then the last book he just made last year, The Two Swords of Christ. I think that probably goes up to like modern times.
It's interesting.
Oh, it's very interesting. A lot I didn't know about that either.
Yeah. Crusades, crazy times.
Oh yeah. Some pretty wild stuff. I'm trying to like dip into a little bit of everything. I try to switch the topics up and stuff but yeah, I mean, I enjoy reading about all this stuff, learning more and more about all this stuff. Every time I read one of these books, it's almost like a little revelation in my mind where it's just like unlocking more doors, you know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I try to stay on top of all that stuff. And then getting as much as the Bible in as I can at the same time. Which that's another thing we were talking about too, like the importance of reading at least a part of the Bible like every day, like just getting the word in every day is like super important in your life.
Oh yeah,
for
no.
Christians,
Yeah,
obviously.
You'd be surprised how many Christians don't do it.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I say that, because it's
Yeah.
like a lot of people are like, oh yeah, or yeah, I read the Bible, I got friends who are like very, very against going to church, which is like, all right, whatever. I mean, you don't have to go to church, but I mean, you really should at least be in the Bible every day, right?
Yeah. I mean, the book of Hebrews, I mean, most people will say, I don't really go to church, but, obviously I believe the Bible, everything that the Bible teaches is true. And I follow the Bible, I read the Bible, but they skip over that portion of Hebrews where it says, don't forsake the assembly of the body. Don't forsake like the gathering of the body. There's something special about gathering corporately, aside from the fact that I think it's an apostolic command. But again, without the body, like Paul says, you have one body, but many members. Everybody's supposed to be together. Everybody has a gift that's going to help the kingdom flourish. The church, the local church, is the pattern that God put in the earth to evangelize the nations in the New Testament. So I feel for those that don't feel the need to go to church. You don't have accountability if you don't go to church. Like that's also problematic. You want to be around people that love you, that care about you, that are going to look out for your best interest.
Yeah, I think some people look at it as a way I mean, we can get into the whole tithing thing too, but I think people look at it as a way well, this guy's telling me his interpretation or his way of the Bible, and if I disagree, what does that mean? It's kind of like, I guess they think they see it as almost like watching the news, right? Well, you're telling me what you want me to hear. What if it's different from what I feel? You know what I mean? Like, I guess, like, how can I trust somebody to tell me what the Bible means, type of thing? You know what I mean?
Right.
I think like that's from what I talk to people, that's kind of like something that's like a whole other thing with the Bible too. Like I was talking to somebody and they couldn't believe in the Bible because they felt that it had been through too many hands.
That's actually false.
I mean, I don't have an answer to that,
Yeah.
but you would have been great. No, but basically like, okay, well, when it was translated in English, I guess that was the King James version was the first version translated in English.
The first version, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's the first version. What is it? The first version put to print in a modern language. Yeah, but I forget. My church history is so bad.
Well, the argument was like, what if King James didn't like this, and this, then maybe he left it out, type of thing. Or you know what I mean? Like they'll have that type of argument. How am I supposed to believe that a book that's supposedly 2,000 years old, everything in it has been untouched and is 100% true, and we all know the game telephone works and stuff like that.
What I would say to somebody who says that, because we probably can't unpack it now, it's getting late, and you're gonna have a hard time unpacking it. You could just tell them, go to YouTube and type in Daniel Wallace, who's the world's leading authority on this. Daniel Wallace, is what we have now what they wrote then? Daniel Wallace, he's a textual critic, New Testament textual critic. Is what we have now what they wrote then? His job is to make sure that what we have now is what they wrote back then. And just listen to Wallace. Listen from the world's leading scholar on the issue and tell me what you think after. We have a wealth, an embarrassment of riches. In fact, you're talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. King James, he was operating, the King James translation is based on a family of texts that come well after the first century. Whereas now, later translations like the New Living Translation, the ESV, the NIV, they're coming from a family of texts that go back very early, that go back earlier than the family of texts that the King James was written from. I would even there's portions of the New Testament that historians, secular and Christians alike, like certain portion of 1 Corinthians 15, Paul quotes something, the passion story in Mark leading up the week leading up to Jesus' death. They believe that these sources go back within 5 years of the life, death, resurrection of Jesus. Like this is historically, when it comes to ancient writings, these are the earliest, and you could test me on this. For sure, these are the earliest writings in terms of how close the writing is to the actual events of all ancient literature. I mean, you believe something that was written about Alexander the Great. It was written 350 to 400 years after the guy died. Right. Jesus, we got it within the first 5 years. So when they talk about, it passed through this guy's hands and that guy's hands, when you actually look at the data, it really didn't. Some of the most accurate...
probably more accurate than any textbook we've ever read. Right?
Yeah, because most of the stuff that you're getting from the ancient world comes hundreds of years after, and 100 years after is considered early. That's how close the New Testament is. It's all happening within the first century, and some passages they track back to creeds or to certain formulations that were within the first 5 years of the life, death, resurrection of Jesus. That's wild to me. Wild that even the historical data is on our side.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Anyway, sorry.
Oh, you're good. I've had you for a while. I'll let you go. I'll wrap this up.
This was fun.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
You want to sign off with a prayer?
Yeah, I'll pray.
You don't seem enthusiastic.
No, it's all good. I do this all the time. I prayed, I think, for like 2 people today, and this will be like the third formal prayer. But Father Jesus, we thank you, Lord. We thank you, God, for this day. I thank you for this podcast. Father, I thank you for Danny and what you're doing through his life and what you're going to do through his podcast and through possibly his future ministry. Lord, I thank you that you have given him a gift and a call. I thank you that he sees it. Father, I thank you that you are going to continue to do mighty works through him. I pray that as his story unfolds, I thank you that as he takes these steps, as you continue to drop breadcrumbs for him, Lord, I pray that this would become an explosive portion of his life. I pray that it would ignite a fire in him that would never go out. I pray that your Holy Spirit would continue to fan the flame in him, in his wife, in his children. And Father, I thank you that this would be the beginning of something great, and it would be the beginning of something big for him. I pray that you would continue to reveal to him exactly what his gift mix is and what he's supposed to be doing in every single season of his life. And I pray that you would continue to bless him. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mike.
No.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you. You know what's a really great Bible verse?